Okay. Okay. Evening, everyone. Welcome back, fellow shop members. So just to recap of what we did last week. Last week, we glued up our case. So our case is now ready for the final outfitting of the face frame and the door in the back. And we roughed out our face frame parts. So we have our two stiles cut to width and length, and we have our two rails that are cut to width and length. And then we are going to start on our half lap joint tonight. So we're going to construct the face frame by putting together half lap joints on our rail and stiles. And then we'll glue that up. And then next week we will, well, actually tonight I will glue the face frame onto the case, and then we will rough cut our door parts tonight. And if we have time enough in the end, we're going to go ahead and construct the veneer panel that will be on the top portion of our door, because I want to get that glued up and show you how we do that glue up also. Okay, so half lap joint basically means that we're going to have one part cut away here and one part cut away here. So when the two overlap each other, they will actually seat together as one joint. Okay. So I have went ahead and pencil. I have went ahead and scribed a line down the center of my board, and I'm going to mark this area that's going to be waste, and this is the area that I want to save. So it's going to be the same on both sides. Hang on, let me get my pencil here. Excuse me. Okay.
So is that piece already cut to length?
I'm sorry?
Is that piece already cut to length?
These stiles, we already cut the length last week. You can see that they just fit flush underneath the top and bottom. So we cut the face frame or the face frame parts to width and length last week. So this is what the face frame will look like as we go. Okay. Now don't forget, we had to overcut for length on the rails because they're going to actually lay in just like this. Okay. So I've got the bandsaw set up. So we're going to bandsaw this line down the middle, and then we're going to use the tenon saw to go ahead and come across this way so we get a good flush line. So we're going to cut this one joint first, and then we'll go back to all the rest of the other 8 cuts, the other 7 cuts. Okay, so I've cut through half the thickness of my material, and now I'm going to use my square, and I'm going to scribe a line from here to here of 1 inch. Why 1 inch? Because that's the width of my rail. So if I laid my rail across like this, you would see that that's where my mark is. So I'm going to take this rail away, and that's where my mark is that I'm going to cut across. So I'm going to put a mark there across, and then I'm going to take my tenon saw and I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cut down to the bandsaw line that I just made. Go slow so you don't overshoot it, especially when you get down towards the bottom. Okay, so that's going to remove this segment of block, and I now have the first part of my half lap joint. I'm going to do the same on the other side, making sure that I get both sides the same. So what I do is I take my square, I mark my reference line, I come to my reference line to come all the way across the material, And then I come down both sides from my reference mark that I made across the face of the frame. Okay. And then I have to think about, well, what side do I want to cut? So I take my marking gauge, and my marking gauge is 3/8 of an inch. Okay. So I've got it set for 3/8 of an inch, which is half the thickness of the material. I'm going to come here. I'm going to score on the same plane, both sides. Okay. And I'm going to put a little pencil mark on that just so I can make sure that I see my line. Okay. Then I'm going to go back to the bandsaw. And I'm going to use my square and my marking knife to score the fibers, the wood for my first cut. This pine tears out really easy. So anytime that you could score that cut so you get less tear out, it will work a long ways of having better success for the joint. Because you want that sidewall as square as you can. Again, slowly when you get close to the end of the cut, you don't want to overshoot it. You want to try to keep your saw as level as you can right there. Okay, so now you can see that we have completed one of our styles. So we'll go back and mark the other style, and then we'll cut the rails. Are there any questions on how we do this so far? I'm going to go ahead and mark both ends this time because we know the process that we're using.
You've done so many of these, Doug, that you don't use a miter box or anything.
You know, after you cut a couple of dovetails, you learn to work with your 10-inch saw quite easily. And this is a very small cut anyhow. And any adjustments that I need to make, I could easily make with a chisel.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So I'm going to go ahead and mark. Again, using my same reference point. Going to fill in my line lightly. I'm going to score my cut on both ends before I start cutting with my 10-inch saw. And again, holding your stock when you make this cross cut is really important. So all I really have is just 2 bench dogs in my tabletop, and I just angle my blade a little bit to start my cut. And once I get my starting mark all the way across, then I'm ready to go down to my depth. Make it visually trying to align my saw to the mark as I go. Making sure I hold my saw square to my cut. Okay. And then
Are you cutting out the line or cutting to one side of it?
I'm cutting just to the right of the line so I could try to leave my pencil mark. Great question, Chris. Thank you. Okay, so now I have my 2 matching styles. And if these were to fit together, okay, you could see that there's a little minor adjustment that we need to make as we go along. So I don't know if you can see this or not. So there's just a little bit of a gap, and we could clean that edge up with a chisel. So we could clean this edge up with a chisel so it mates up true as we go along. So
Doug,
now, go ahead.
you might want to explain to folks how, when you scored that down the middle lengthwise, how did you account for the kerf of the bandsaw blade so that you didn't cut too much out of both sides and you end up with a joint that's thinner?
Great point. So when I adjusted my fence on my bandsaw, okay, I adjusted it to the left of the line. So I left my line that was down the center of the board that left over. So I would have a little bit to trim with as I went along. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
I left my self a little thick, and then I could always trim down with a chisel or my router plane.
Yep.
Great point. Thanks, Pete.
So how close did it come out? It's difficult to see in the video.
Until we
Quality.
get the rails cut.
Yeah.
Until we get the rails cut, we'll know more.
Okay.
And again, if I overshoot it and one piece is slower than the other, it's relatively easy to go back with a jack plane and go ahead and plane all this down flush so it fits flush against the carcass
Mm-hmm.
of the cabinet. Things happen, you know. I make
Yep.
mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's easy to do. I'm going to reference my same line, same side. And I'm actually going to hold this up and make sure that before I make my cut, I'm okay on my line. So it looks like on my style that I went a little deep. So what I want to do is I want to leave a little extra material on my rail sides as I go, just to allow myself room to adjust. I'm going to mark the area that I'm going to take away, which was the wrong side. I want to take that away, and I want to leave this top. Okay, I need to adjust my fence a little so I can leave some room. Okay, looks like it's going to be a pretty close fit. So I'm going to go ahead and score my line, my reference line with my marking knife. Go back with my 10-inch saw.
Doug, can you use a stop block on the bandsaw so that you don't cut it too deep?
Yes, you can. And I didn't cut that deep enough, so little trim here, right there. Okay, now we're going to test fit. And look what I did. The wrong side. Oh my God. How did I manage that? So you can
Just
see
to
what
make us feel better.
yeah, you can see that I made a huge mistake by cutting away the wrong side. Okay. So what we'll have to do is I'll make 2 more rails real quick, and then we'll get back to business here. Give me a second. Rookie mistake. Okay, let's try this again. Sometimes I'm actually glad when we make mistakes like that to show you what not to do. So I'm going to go back and reset my thickness of my gauge. So I'm just a little proud of where I need for my cut. Okay, much better. So you can see I'm still just a little bit proud. So I'm about a 16th proud, which is good because I can come back here and I can take this away with a chisel in order to make both surfaces flush. So I have something to work with and I don't have to make up anything. Okay, so let's do the other one. What the heck? Okay. What? I know that yep. Okay. Can everybody hear me?
Now we can.
Okay.
You were off for a few seconds there.
Okay. So now I'm going to loosely put this together, and I'm going to mark a reference of AA and BB over here. Okay. And then figure out what I have to take on each joint to make everything level. Okay. So I'm pretty close here. So I'm going to start over here. If I'm close, I'm just going to take a bench chisel. Okay, I'm pretty flush on there. Now I'm going to go back to my other side and see that I have a fairly large amount to cut off here. So I'm going to actually take that off of here because I've got more meat there. So much so that I'm going to come down with my tenon saw about a 1/16 of an inch. And then I'm going to use my router plane to come in to make this depth even. So again, the router plane is a great tool for making things level, and don't try to take everything at one time. The trick to using a router plane is to make sure that your workpiece is secured, okay? And you can even hold a piece in the back for more stability, okay? So I know that this was BB, so this end has to fit, and it's still not flush, so I need to go down some more. Let me know when we're at 7:45. Okay, we'll be fine. Okay, a little bit more. A, A. Okay, right there is a perfect fit. Okay, so go back and match up A and A, and I will be done with both of those sides. Well, maybe not. Okay, a little bit more here. Okay. Now, of course, I'm using the hand tool method. There's nothing saying that you couldn't use a router to do this, or even a dado stacked blade on the table saw. But I'm a hand tool kind of a guy, so I like to use hand tools as much as I can. All right, we get a fit there. Let's go back to our other side. And we'll get this glued up. And then we'll go on to roughing out the parts for the door. And then I'll go over what we're going to do for a veneered panel insert. Still a little proud.
It's interesting to watching on this video, when you pick those shavings, they look enormous
Well,
on the
thank you.
camera. On the camera, no,
Oh, on camera?
the camera makes them look like quarter-inch.
Oh,
thick.
really? Oh,
But
wow.
I know they're hair thin, but it's amazing how the camera distorts a
Well,
little bit of
it
that.
is called a zoom app, so
Yeah, right.
no pun intended. Okay, we're there. So that is how we do the construction for the face frame. And this is all, I'm going to glue this up off camera, okay? And I'm going to apply this to the carcass so we can be ready for next week for the door. Now, what I want to do now is talk about the door. So the door is going to have,
Doug, before you go there, how are you going to attach the face frame to the carcass?
I'm just going to glue it. I'm going to glue it just like this.
Okay, no fasteners of any type.
Nope, just glue it just like this right here.
Got it.
So it's going to look like that when I'm done.
Okay, good.
Okay. So that's what the face frame is going to look like when it's installed. So the door is going to be very similar. Well, we're going to have two stiles coming down each side, but because we're going to make a divider, let me get the drawing here real quick. We're going to make a divider between the top and bottom of the door. So we're going to actually have 3 rails on the door instead of just 2 like we did on the face frame. But one of the things we have to think about is, so I've made these 1 1/4 inches wide. So one will fit down here and one will fit down here. Well, we'll just hold them up so you can see. So one's going to fit like this and one's going to fit like this, okay? And then we're going to have a panel here and a panel here. And then a rail going across the top, the middle, and the bottom, okay? But in order to hold my panels, I want to make a slight groove to be able to hold my panels. So I have cut these to rough length of 16 inches. Okay, so they're obviously way too long, but that's okay. I can cross cut these to fit. So what I've done is I've made a 1/4 inch groove down the middle of my piece. And to do that, I went to the table saw, okay? And if this was the table saw blade, I went down and I made a pass on this side, and then I reversed it and went down this side. So I now have a rabbet that is a 1/4 inch deep and a 1/4 inch wide. And that is going to be for my panels that's going to fit in. They're almost going to be this size. You can almost see how these are going to fit in. Now, next week, we're going to fit up the stile this way, and then we're going to cross cut our rails. But in the rails, we're going to do something interesting, okay? So we're going to cut a notch like this. So this is called a stub tenon. So we're actually going to cut this material away here, and we're going to cut this material away here so it fits inside the groove. At the same time, I'm going to have a 1/4 inch groove down the middle, just like we did here. So I'm going to have grooves to capture my panels, but I'm going to have a small stub tenon to fit the rail into the stile. Now, when I lay out my rail, okay, I'm going to have to account for the width of my opening into the face frame, but then I have to allow a 1/4 inch on each side to be able to get my tenon. So if, let's say, the rail was this big, okay, I would have to measure from here to here in order to get my proper length for my tenon to fit into my groove for my stile. Make sense? Okay, so that's what I've done on the door frame parts. We will build the door in detail next week, but I wanted to take a few minutes to go ahead and talk about the veneered panel because we have to have that set up for next week. And it's got, the glue's got to dry. So I'm gonna get my material over here. So we're gonna work with some Babinga here, okay? And let me get my veneer knife, excuse me. So this is really basic veneering right here. So what we're gonna do is, we're gonna take a 1/4 inch piece of plywood and we're gonna cover it with veneer on both sides. Whenever you do veneer, what you do on one side, you have to do the other. So I'm just going to lay out my panel here and get a rough outline of what my veneer dimensions are. I'm going to go ahead and score my veneer. And all I'm using is a scalpel. So I have a veneer panel for here. It's okay if it's not matching the edge because this is much larger than I need, and I'll just go trim this after it's all glued up. Okay, and then I'll go to the other side. But this side, I need to make a small patch, but that's okay. That's what we want to work with. So I'm going to come over here. And I wanted to show you how to do a small patch. Hand me the steel ruler up there, please. The 36-inch steel ruler. Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Producer. So I'm laying my straight edge. As I overlay my two pieces of veneer, I'm overlaying my straight edge until I cut through both sections. And then I'm checking to see if I have a good glue joint as I go. Okay, I can see here that I don't. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn these over face to face. I'm going to come back and make another cut until I get a good glue face on edge to edge of the veneer. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually tape it together, and then I can cut it rough to the size of the panel. So I'm going to take it in the middle, and I'm going to squeeze two pieces together, and I'm going to take my tape and press it across the two pieces of veneer so they're drawing taut to each other as I go.
I've lost you, Doug. What's a small patch?
Not necessarily a patch, but the piece of veneer that I had was not wide enough for my panel. So I only had a piece of veneer from this side to this side, and it wasn't wide enough to complete my panel that I needed. So I actually just needed to attach two pieces of veneer side by side.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. Okay. So now I have a good panel to work with to cut here. Okay. That's close enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our veneer glue and we're going to actually apply veneer glue on both sides. of the panel. I'm going to take my short net roller and I'm going to go ahead and spread my glue out. And what I'm looking for is just a thin sheen all the way across the panel. I'm not looking to make it really thick, just a thin sheen. I don't know if you can see that or not. Okay, you can see a thin sheen all the way across the panel. And then I'm going to take my veneer.
That veneer glue is different than Tite Bond?
It is Tite Bond glue, but it's called veneer cold press glue, and it is a little different than Tite Bond 1, 2, or 3. It's made specifically just for veneering. And I'm just going to put a couple pieces of tape across this just to hold it in place until I get it underneath the clamps. Okay, and then I'm going to reverse it and do the same thing on the other side.
Doug, do you have to sand the plywood or do anything to prepare it?
You don't have to do anything special to the plywood. So it's okay if you use maybe like 150 grit just to scuff it up a little bit, but you don't want a lot of raised grain or anything on the plywood because you want your veneer panel to fit good and flush. Now, normally I would use my vacuum press for this, but I wanted to show this technique to show that you can do small veneer projects at home just with a couple of pieces of plywood. And I'll put this in between my pieces of plywood and I'll put this over the top so I have like a small press, okay? And I will come over to get my clamps. This is very easy to do at home, and you can make some really simple veneer projects just using the technique that I just showed you. This is how we actually started making our veneer panels in Palomar before we used the press.
You're clamping on the diagonal. Is that specifically by choice or?
Yes, so I can get even pressure all the way around. So I want the two panels to press together as much as I can with even pressure all the way around.
If the glue comes out of the veneer, aren't you gonna glue the plyboard together?
And you know, I don't use a lot of extra glue that it may do that, but ideally I would use melamine on this, but I didn't have enough sections of melamine to do that today. But what you could also do is put a piece of newspaper or brown paper bag over the top and bottom of the veneer to help prevent it from doing that also. Okay, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to tighten my clamps. And I'm going to make sure that I have even pressure all the way around. Okay, so it's going to look just like that. I just sandwiched the small 1/4 inch ply with the veneer on each side in between two pieces of plywood. And that will be dried for next week for when we construct our door using our 2 stiles and our 3 rails, and we'll fit our veneer panel in, and then we'll work on the slats for the bottom section of the door next week. Now, I asked last week what color we think we may want to paint this cabinet. Does anybody have any thoughts on what we want to paint it? Now that you kind of see the decorative element of the veneer, this is Babinga, by the way. So what color would you like to see the cabinet painted?
Ask the wife.
Ask the wife. I don't have one of those, so that's why I'm relying on you guys.
That's the right answer for my house, I can tell you that.
So be thinking about it, and let me know when we have our next meeting. Speaking of the next meeting, next Wednesday, we're going to have a general guild meeting. So everybody from Fine Woodworkers is going to join in on a Zoom meeting next Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And we're all going to have a kumbaya via Zoom. And we're going to have a guest speaker, George Von Driska. Is that right, Dallas?
That's correct.
That's right.
Okay. George Von Driska is going to be our guest speaker for our general meeting, just like we would be having it at the church. So it'll be, an hour or so long. He's going to show us all of his projects and what he does. And thank you to Gary, Dallas, and Travis for setting it up for us. It's going to be cool.
And Pete's,
I'm going to be back here.
Work there, by the way.
I'm sorry?
Pete's really the guy who did the legwork there.
Oh, very nice. Thanks, Pete. Again, I know you're pretty good buds with George, so thank you for setting that up.
You're welcome.
So our next meeting for our wall cabinet is going to be Wednesday, June 3rd at 7 o'clock. Make sure you mark your calendars because it's going to be exciting. We're going to have this face frame done and glued on, and then we're going to fit the door. And that's pretty much mostly what we're going to do next week is construct the door. Okay, so I will show you how to lay that out and how to leave an even reveal all the way around the door, between the door and the face frame, and how we're going to fit the veneer panel in the top and how we're going to fit our slats in the bottom. Any questions so far this week for what we've done?
Doug, what do you intend to make the slats out of?
We're going to make them out of pine.
So it'll be painted the same?
I'm going to actually try to use a contrasting color. So my producer has some white paint left over from his project that we just finished. So we'll probably have Babinga on the top and probably white slats. And that will be a nice contrast for whatever color we pick to make the cabinet.
And when are you going to do the chamfers? You said you were going to do some chamfers around there.
The chamfers we're going to do around the edge, we'll do that next week too.
What is
So
the
all we're
brand
gonna-
name of that bandsaw?
I'm sorry?
What kind of bandsaw is that? You
So
14
the bandsaw I used today was a Laguna 1412 model. It's a 14-inch bandsaw with a 12-inch resaw capability on the saw. You could go on Laguna's website or Rockler's website to check out the specs.
Okay.
And when you get back in the shop, you can take a look at it over there or try it there.
Absolutely.
Oh, is that the same one at the shop?
It is.
Oh,
Absolutely.
there's 3 at the shop. Is it the smaller one?
It is. It's the smaller one.
Oh,
Just like the one we have at the shop.
Oh, I've used that.
Of course.
Okay.
Any more questions for today? Okay, gents, thanks so much for stopping in, and
Thank you. Mhm.
we'll see you next week at the general meeting. And don't forget, June 3rd, we'll come back and build our door for our cabinet.
Nice job, Doug.
Thank
Thanks.
you.
Doug.
Thanks, guys.
Everyone.
I appreciate it. Thanks for stopping in my shop.